America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our special, The Education Issue. It is a big issue because one reason why America has been the greatest country in the world is because we're pretty smart, and right now we're pretty dumb. I'm always thinking about and also being very sad about the state of education in America today. It is abysmal and embarrassing and pathetic. Example 10 million is UCSD, University of California, San Diego. This is one of the prestigious UC schools. So in California, you have at the top, you have the UC system, UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC San Diego. Those are like the top three. And then you have like the state schools, and then there's levels below that. But like these are like the best of the best. At UCSD, they're teaching remedial math to college students. Remedial math, the catch-up math, at a first grade level. First grade remedial math to college students at not only a good UC school, but one that's known for being like a math and science oriented UC school. This is an article from The Atlantic. It's called A Recipe for Idiocracy. What happens when even college students can't do math anymore? The article says that for the last few years, America's been using young people as lab rats for a education experiment where schools across the country lowering standards, removing penalties for failure. It's been going on for decades, but kicked up even more post-COVID. 5 years ago, this article says about 30 incoming freshmen at UC San Diego had math skills below a high school level. That's a middle school level. And by the way, this report, this is from a faculty report in UC San Diego. Like they're admitting this themselves. There are now 900 kids taking remedial math courses, and some aren't even at a middle school level. Last year, the university, by the way, it's a 30% undergraduate acceptance rate. So they just launched their remedial math courses that focus on elementary school. So what kind of stuff are we talking about? So this report says that 60% of students who took the remedial course can't divide a fraction by 2. So you give them 1/2, like a half a cup of something, you say divided by 2, they don't know what that means, they don't know what to do. But I think even worse than that is one of the tutors in this remedial math class at this college, which is, by the way, $44,000 a year to go to, said that the students, the bigger issue isn't even the fact that they don't know how to do the math. This tutor said, they don't even know how to begin solving word problems. So even just like logically, like they don't even know like what it is, like what to do. They don't even know where to start. They're so dumb. They look at it like, I don't even, you know what I'm saying? It's not even, I don't know how to do this math problem. They don't even know what math is. They don't even know how to think about the problem. Here's the kind of questions, right? So this is 7 plus 2 equals x plus 6. I gave that to my first grader. My daughter's in first grade. She got that right. Not to brag, pretty easy. The chair of the math department at UC Davis says we call it quantitative literacy. Just even knowing which fraction is smaller or larger, or that the slope is positive when it's going up. Can't even conceptualize that. So what in the world is going on? This is so horrific. And this article talks about the use of AI, and because kids are using AI, they can't think. Yes. This author blames the lack of standardized tests. Yes. Black Lives Matter said that standardized tests were racist because black kids didn't do well in them. This article talks about that. They say during W. Bush's administration, there was a policy where if a school was doing really bad on standardized tests, they would get more money at first, but if they didn't improve, then they would have their funding pulled. So there's an incentive to improve and keep improving. And this article says that research suggests that it helped, especially poor black students. But after 2015, Barack Obama, the federal government backed off from its accountability measures. Great. And then they started giving, no zeros, you got to pass everyone. And if you're at this point where you got to pass everyone and there's no grades, like, well, why even assign anything to begin with? Here's where I think it gets worse. It just keeps getting worse. This article says that more than not just this article, the report from UC San Diego, says that more than a quarter of the students who were placed in the first grade elementary school remedial math courses they got straight A's in high school. Not only straight A's in high school, but straight A's on their high school math classes. Almost all of them took advanced math courses in high school. So these, like if you told me this story, I would say, oh yeah, like the kids in remedial math, they were the C students in high school, right? In math class, they really struggled in math, or they were A students and everything else, but C students in math, and they really need that extra help. Nope, they were great math. They got A's in math in high school, in advanced math courses, and can't understand what a fraction is. 25% of the kids in remedial math, 25% of the kids had a 4.0 GPA in math. The average was a 3.7 in math. So the grades of the kids in remedial math in 2025 were higher than the students admitted in 2020. So their grades were higher, but they are dumber. They were given A's in AP Calc, but they would get the lowest score on the AP Calc test. And they keep getting promoted. They keep advancing. But they can't. If you can't do the base, you can't do any higher levels. But the teachers would just push them through because they don't hurt their college prospects. So they make it all the way to college before they even know that they're dumb and can't do first grade math. If only there was some sort of test, some sort of way to find out, some sort of like standardized scholastic test that measured every student's, aptitude. Like if there was like a standardized aptitude test, SAT would be like a nice acronym, a standardized aptitude test that everyone could take it all across the country. And it would be hard, but the point of it would be no matter what high school you went to, you could measure all the kids by the exact same standard. That would be a good idea, but of course that's racist, we were told. Here's the Atlantic. The UC system eliminated its best tool for assessing students' academic preparedness. In 2020, system leaders voted to phase out standardized test scores out of admissions decisions. They argued that the test worsened racial divides and unfairly privileged wealthy students. But SAT and ACT scores are the most reliable predictors of a student's math ability, the report found, of course. But they had to get rid of it because black kids don't do as well in the SAT. So that disparity proves racism, proves that the test is racist, so we're going to eliminate the test. Now listen, I don't care about UCSD, whatever. I care about people in my country not knowing any math. It's really bad. It's bad for people's employment. It's bad for building things. It's bad for like not being able to build anything. It's bad for critical thinking skills. I think one of the reasons why, I don't know if anyone's made this point before, maybe, probably. I don't think I have like an original point here, but I think one reason why so many people fell for COVID was because people don't know math. And because people couldn't think clearly. They didn't know numbers. They didn't know what numbers meant. So the government could release numbers of things and no one knew if it was good or bad or going up or going down or what per capita meant or what the percent chance of something happening was or the likelihood of a thing, let alone R naught. Or like, what's the R naught? Like, what's the cycle threshold? Like, people didn't know what numbers were. So it made people really easy to be manipulated. To the point where one of the initial panic moments was when the government released a graph. This graph right here, we have the graph with no numbers on it. There's no numbers on the graph. This is a graph about hospital capacity. Remember, we got to flatten the curve. 2 weeks to flatten the curve because you don't want that big red bump, right? Because then, there's hospital capacity, a big red bump, bad, people die, it's red, right? And people were like, oh, red, bad, and then we freaked out. There were no numbers on the graph. But whatever, we all fell for it because we lost the ability to think. So yeah, AI is bad because it'll help you get the right answer. But if we don't know why the answer's right or why it matters that it's right or how to think through solving problems, we're done. We're done, it's over. Forget about building a bridge anymore. We'll forget how to do things. It doesn't make us smarter. As someone wrote on Twitter, in just a decade, education activists in the US managed to set back student outcomes by 50 years, an impressive accomplishment rivaled only by the Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan. I mentioned the SAT in this segment. There's something even better than the SAT. It's called the classical learning test. Jeremy Wayne Tate is the man behind that. He's wonderful, and he's trying his darndest, and I'm with him, to try to revolutionize our education system and bring it back. Just got to go back to the way it's always been. Truly, what made us the greatest country in the world. We have strayed so far. We see the fruit. There's no question about it anymore. How do we get back? We'll talk to Jeremy about that next, right here on the First TV. Spread the word.
My name's Teacher Green, and something I like about my classroom is that my students built the trans flag last year. We had the pleasure of reading a book called Melissa about a transgender fourth grade girl, and it was very impactful for all of us. Afterwards, we built the trans flag using the shapes of our hands.
Does everybody agree with the gender they were assigned? No. Some of us maybe. Some of us might go, yeah, that's definitely me. But some of us might be looking at that paper and going, I'm not a boy, I'm not a girl. And that's exactly how trans people feel. This week is Trans Visibility Week. What does it mean to be visible? Yes, to be seen. Whether or not you agree with transness, trans people do exist. You might not see them every day. You might not even realize it's a trans person at all. That's because they're regular people living regular lives.
What in the world is going on? The great Jeremy Wayne Tate is here. He is the founder of the Classical Learning Test, which we will tell you all about in just a moment. Jeremy, great to talk to you, brother.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
What's one of your go-to examples of the current state of our education system? I mean, that's more of a social problem that we just heard right there. But we were talking about UCSD and how all the kids going into UCSD don't know first grade math. So that's more of an academic issue. What's your big concern?
Yeah, I think we see so many examples of, the gender ideology and that sort of thing in classrooms. I think the greater crisis, though, is that if you go into any classroom and you ask students, what's the point of school? What are we doing here? Almost every kid is going to tell you something like, it's to get a better job, right? And that is a very impoverished view for what education is, right? The older answer was always that the purpose of education was to grow in virtue, to expand the mind, to grow in wisdom. And the truth is right now, we don't even know what jobs are going to look like in 5 or 10 years with the AI revolution. And so we need to go back, I think right now more than ever, to first principles education as a deep dive into what it means to be human.
Because we're so many generations now into the straying from the right path. When do you pinpoint that left turn or wherever, where we just lost our way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great book, a New York Times bestseller, The Battle for the American Mind. My dear friend, David Goodwin, he's the head of the Association of Classical Christian Schools. He co-authored this book with Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, and they outline what happened throughout the 20th century. And so essentially, there's 4 big levers that kind of control education, right? What are these levers? Well, they're these. It's teacher certification, right? What do you have to do to become a teacher? And right now, you've got to go ingest a whole bunch of crazy ideologies at the ed schools, at all of our colleges and universities. It's one. The other is accreditation, right? What is a school and what isn't? How do you become a school? Accrediting the flow of public funds, right? Where we've had all of the taxpayer money and there's no way to opt out of this, go to support failing schools, where we know objectively that the very best schools are Catholic schools or Christian schools. These are the schools that are getting hard results, right? The average CLT, SAT, ACT score at a Christian school is about 20% higher. Same for homeschoolers than the public school. So we're not funding what actually works. We're continuing to fund the failing public school system. And the other big lever, of course, is standardized testing. The standardized testing ultimately shapes the academic focus at a school. And so all 4 of these big levers, they got kind of hijacked in the early 20th century by radical progressives. And that's why we've been in this condition we've been in. Education, I mean, think about this. What we consider education, it's completely different from what America's founding generation thought we were talking about by education, right? But right now, there's a recovery movement happening right now. Some people call it the classical renewal movement, the homeschooling movement, but it is fast and it is underway. and we're taking education back.
Yeah. What is a classical Christian school?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing we're talking about is the goal, or what we call the telos in education, right? And the goal for a classical Christian school is the cultivation of virtue, or what you might even call Christian sanctification. And I think there's a great paradox here, is that even though the goal of a classical Christian school is not to make employable graduates, they end up making the most employable graduates. I've got about 65 full-time here at CLT, and we mostly hire people who have had this kind of formation growing up, either homeschooled or at a classical Christian school. And because they're well-grounded, ethically, morally, they're just good people. They also then make incredible employees as well. And the other thing with this is that education was always, how does G.K. Chesterton define education? He says it's the soul of a society as it moves from one generation to the next, right? This beautiful transmission of this timeless intellectual inheritance. We've completely lost that in the mainstream public schools, but that's what it is in a great Catholic school or classical Christian school. They're passing down the Western intellectual inheritance from one generation to the next.
Yeah, one major reason why we've lost so much sight of who we are and why this country matters and we matter and the soul matters. Goodness. I always tell this story, but we talked to one of the foremost psychologists a couple years ago. We were talking about bad news and what bad news does to the brain. That's what he wrote about. And I said, what does it do to the soul? And he said, oh, as psychologists, we don't study the soul. I said, that's weird because the word psychology literally means study of the soul. Like, that's just a good example of how far we strayed. But like, can you talk about rigor for a second? Because, you know, every once in a while people will see online like this test from 1827 and it's super hard. And I think about what our founding fathers knew, and like we've shared before, the letter that Thomas Jefferson gave to his nephew. And it's like, well, make sure you read all these classics, and it's all these ancient Greek writers, like half of them I've never even heard of. And he's like, of course you got to read them in their original Greek, and then you can move on to these. You're like, what? This kid's 15 years old. How were the standards so high then, and now they're so low?
Yeah, you know, there's that great quote, you know, I think it's John Sorup says, you know, in 100 years, we went from teaching Greek and Latin in high school to teaching remedial English in college. And it's kind of funny, but it's sad, and it's totally true. Look, you can go back and look at something like the Harvard entrance exam. The copy we have is from 1869, but it was the exam that was the Harvard entrance exam for most of the 19th century. And what are they doing? Well, they're translating Greek and Latin, right? And so what that did was it shaped the kind of education, you know, building up to that. But what actually happened was this. I mean, you have the revolution in education in the early 20th century, John Dewey and others. And what they said was that students shouldn't have to learn anything they're not going to use, right? Well, when are you going to use philosophy? When are you going to use poetry? When are you going to use classical literature? When are you going to use Latin, right? And so we got rid of all of these things because they're not practical. But what we got rid of in the process was civilization itself, right? We got rid of the rich, beautiful, timeless cultural inheritance that always made the West great. And it's the thing that has gotten us into the crisis that we're in right now. Every single issue, every one is downstream from education, right? You shape hearts and minds, and then that's what's going to set the policies for the next 50 years. But again, I'm optimistic because I think we're in the midst of a great recovery movement right now.
And I want to ask you about the CLT, but one comment quickly. To my shame, I've never read a fiction book my whole life until a couple months ago. I read East of Eden, and I think about it all the time. Like it pops up in my so this idea of practicality. Like, when are you going to use that? It's like always running in the background software of my brain constantly. Yeah. And informs how I make decisions and think about the world all the time. So is it practical? Like, I don't know, like, no, but also, yeah, it's the most practical thing I've ever done, maybe. So just a shame how we've come to look at it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Oh, yeah.
Please go on.
Oh, yeah, I think the first one I read was actually Crime and Punishment back in college, and it was like, this is a psychological thriller about a guy who commits a double murder, in the 1800s, and you're like, how could this possibly relate at all? what happens is throughout the course of the book is he's keeping this horrible dark secret, you know, and the guilt of it takes over his mind, it takes over his whole life, and in some ways it shows how sin disfigures us and shatters all of our relationships and comes to completely own us, right? And so in some ways these things that are not relevant are the most relevant at the end of the day.
That's great. I saw this video of this, I don't know, it's maybe, I'm going to be 18-year-old, ghetto-looking black guy, dreadlocks, whole thing, and he read Frankenstein. And he's like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read in my life. And he went through all the deep themes of Frankenstein. He's like, why have people kept me from these amazing works of art? Everyone can benefit from this stuff. It's a crime, really, that we've kept it from people. So let's go to the CLT. So you're a part of the solution. So what is the classical learning test?
Yeah, you know, it might seem like a weird thing, right? Of like, who cares about a standardized test? What could be more boring than a standardized test? Well, as I said a minute ago, this is what we believe is a major lever that if you can change this one thing, the college entrance exam, then it's going to fundamentally reorient, even redefine what it means to be educated coming out of high school. So if you imagine as a hypothetical that on the SAT and ACT, students were always expected to be able to read something from maybe Aristotle's Politics, maybe Plato's Republic, maybe a passage from Cicero, maybe something from John Adams or from John Locke. That would reshape what happens at the high school level in a very, very powerful way. So CLT is an alternative to the SAT and ACT, but we're drawing heavily from the Western Catholic Christian intellectual tradition, because really that is the intellectual tradition that gave birth to America.
And you guys have had incredible success. So who takes the CLT? And I know you've been working with Secretary of War to get this into our military schools as well. But what does it look like? Who would take it? And why would someone take it now?
Yeah, it's been incredible working with Secretary Hegseth. I mean, he refers to CLT as the gold standard. And that's certainly true, you know, for the service academies and hopefully for, you know, more and more, you know, colleges and universities as well. So, you know, 10 years ago, it was mostly homeschool students, classically oriented students that were taking the CLT. But more and more, it's mostly just public school students who either have an interest in the humanities or maybe they want to go somewhere like West Point or the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy. And they know that the CLT is a better way to showcase their academic ability and to really put their best foot forward.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Jeremy, keep up the great work, man. Praying for you. Really grateful for everything you're doing on Twitter. You're reaching a lot of people there. I mean, you're doing great stuff on Twitter, like really opening up people's eyes to beauty and the important things of life. And then to do it on the ground and like operate within the system that currently exists, but totally transform it at the same time. That's really awesome. Where can people learn more about the classical learning test?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah. So cltexam.com is our website. And then, follow me on X at Jeremy Tate 41. Thanks for the encouraging words and keep up the good work.
Yeah, you too, brother. We'll do it together. Thanks, man. cltexam.com. Go check it out. All right, more coming up next year on the state of education in America and solution focused as well. First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special here on the First TV about the state of education in America. We'll go to Dr. Matthew Petrusik as our next guest. He's the Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute. Dr. Petrusik, how are you, sir?
I'm well. It's great to join you.
Good. Glad you're here. What is the Word on Fire Institute?
So the Word on Fire Institute is part of Bishop Robert Barron's apostolate, Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. So it's really divided into three parts. There's all the work that Bishop Barron does. Your audience is probably familiar with his work. He's on many podcasts, many shows, and he's seeking to reach out into the culture to speak Christ into the culture. Then we have a publishing arm, and the Word on Fire Institute is the formation arm of Bishop Barron's work. So we have about 40,000 members, and we bring those members on a digital platform through courses, through live seminars, through live series, all with the goal of training them to go out into the culture to proclaim Christ.
Nice. What would you say is the state of our education structure in America? You can go any age you want, K through 12, college. What do you think the state of it is?
Failing. I think the data shows that, whatever anecdotal experiences we may have, and some of them are very positive, thank God. But overall, we can see on any metric that you want to use to really assess how things are going, either in public or, in fact, in many, if not most, private schools, students are just not performing at the levels that they used to. And their behavior is worse, and their focus is off, and they're not socializing like they used to. So all in all, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that we're in a crisis as a country educationally.
Is there a moment you point to, or let me ask it this way. What do you think is most lacking, or one thing that is lacking a lot that you find most distressing?
If I had to sum it up, I would say that education, and this is both public and private, lost its way when we lost a sense of who the human person is, and what the nature of it is, what the nature of a human being is. And I know that sounds very abstract, but really this idea has been creeping into the culture for a long time, and it came from both the left and the right. I should emphasize, because so on the left we have this idea of the individuals as kind of an emanation of a collectivist culture, and this is where we get all this ideological kind of education, especially we see in public schools and in universities. But there's also a problem from what we can identify as the right as well, and that's this idea of you do you, I'll do me. This idea of you have your truth, I have my truth. Now, when that idea becomes a part of sort of the premise of an educational curriculum, we completely lose track of what it is to educate children. If we don't know what the human being is for and what the proper formation of a human being is, especially including young people, then education, as the curriculum of education, is just going to go all over the place. And we're going to see the kinds of results that we have today.
Yeah, our last guest, Jeremy Wayne Tate, said the purpose of education today, if you ask most kids, I mean, most kids will say, nothing, or it's torture, or stupid, whatever. But even if you get some answer, it'll be like, well, so I get a better job. Like that's the purpose of life, is to get a better job, or that's the purpose of education, is to get a better job. So I believe you said, I want to make sure I get the words right, the nature of a human, or what it means to be human. Is that what you said? What does that mean? What is the proper view?
Yeah, well, just as analogously, we know what any given organ in the human body is for, right? We know what its function is, and because we know that, we know what defines health, and we know what defines disease. If we didn't have that baseline standard for the function of any given organ or any given system in our body, then the whole enterprise of medicine wouldn't make any sense. Well, it's just using that in an analogy to say we have to know what the function of a human being is as a whole, not only in terms of our biological health, but our psychological health, our moral health, our spiritual health. And prior to, it's hard to put a date on it, but let's say prior to the last 50, 60 years, there was a kind of consensus across most of the West, not just the United States, that the overarching arch of any human life was basically to become acculturated, become habituated, to learn the virtues, to, of course, learn how to be able to be productive in some sector of the economy, but to learn how to behave, to learn even basic things like how to converse and have eye contact, and how to grow up and have a family and manage a household. That was sort of the basic structure, but that has completely fallen apart, again, for many reasons. But having lost that, then trying to have an educational curriculum sort of absent this basic agreement of what it is to be a person, what it is to be human, we're going to continue to see the kind of failure we see now.
Gosh, that's so good. Do you mind if we go through that analogy one more time? I just want to make sure we really drive that home, and maybe we go a little more into it now. And of course, analogies break down eventually, but do the medicine analogy again. So like if we didn't know the parts of the human body or why they mattered, what would medicine then look like? Just to drive home like how absurd education is today, because we don't know the nature of a human, or the point of human life, or the point of life.
Yeah.
What would medicine look like today if we didn't know what kidneys did?
Exactly. Well, unfortunately, sadly, the analogy breaks down in this specific respect. You have medical schools now that have adopted gender ideology, right? So the very concept of there being biological reality is now breaking down because of ideological concerns within medical schools. Now, I think we've turned a corner on some of that. But the analogy is that, look, we know what setting aside that sort of the gender ideology madness, we know what defines a healthy heart. We know it defines healthy kidneys. We know it defines a healthy liver, et cetera, right? We know it defines healthy, the system of the whole body working together. Well, it's not, and this was the case really until not too long ago. You take the whole human being in all of his or her totality, we have some basic idea of what the health of that person is. And if that includes biological health, but more than that, psychological health, moral health, spiritual health. And so this idea that, well, we can, in science, we can talk about the human body, but when we're talking about the human person, it's just up for grabs. We have no idea what to do, and each person gets to create their own truth. It's madness. And we're seeing the results of that, not just in terms of test scores, but the spiking rates of anxiety, depression, suicide, all of this, this despair. It's all because we've lost track of the basics.
So this idea of up for grabs is like, that's a powerful image, and clearly everyone's so lost. So many kids are lost. It's such a shame that we've done this to them. So what would you like to introduce into our culture again, or into the education system, that would help kids and teachers and parents reconnect to that very basis of like, what is life then? What is the human? What do you want people to know?
That there is a human nature. So just as even before you start like specifying what it is, just agreement that there is a nature, that it does mean something fixed to be human. It means something fixed to be a man. It means something fixed to be a woman. Now, of course, within that, there can be great variability. In fact, even important variability to recognize in terms of individuality. Absolutely. But there's a baseline standard human nature. And so once we can agree on that as a culture, then on that premise, we can start having conversations about what leads to that human nature flourishing, what leads to just, generically kids being happy. And it's not that hard to start making incremental progress for that. One big thing, for example, is get the phones and the computers out of the classroom. That's one thing that the evidence, we can sort of figure it out anecdotally, we can figure it out through common sense, but now all of the empirical evidence showing that was a mistake. So step number one, stop relying on technology to educate our children. Step number two, get discipline back in the classroom. Step number three, recognize that boys and girls are different and allow those differences to sort of take their own track as they used to be able to do within the educational system. And just, I think those three steps will get us on the path to back to sanity.
That's great. Where does Christianity come into this? Where does the Word of God come into this?
Well, first and foremost, Christ as the Logos. At the beginning of the Gospel of John, right, we have that in the beginning was the Word, and it associates Jesus Christ, who comes into time and space, and Jesus, incarnate, and then of course the whole arc of his life, death, and resurrection and ascension into heaven. So that's Christianity in its revelatory form. But as the Gospel of John shows us, Jesus Christ is already present in the world as reason itself, as order itself, as intelligibility itself. And so anytime that we're connected to truth, anytime we're in a spot where our minds have grabbed onto something real, we're already having an encounter with Christ. And so even in the secular sphere, even in public education, we should see Christ in the form of the Logos structuring absolutely all of the curriculum.
What is the website for Word on Fire Institute? People can learn more.
Yeah, sure. It's institute.wordonfire.org.
Wonderful. Dr. Matthew Petrusik, Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute. Thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you for your work on this. Wonderful. Let's come back. And I want to debunk one of the biggest mistakes in the education system today that I fear everyone has fallen for, and I fell for a long time as well. So no shame, but it's time we debunk it once and for all. We'll do that next right here on The First TV. Welcome back to our special on the education issue. I want to debunk, that sigh there was the gratitude to the last two guests we had and the wisdom that's out there that they're tapping into again and bringing back into the conversation and into our world again. Because it was totally gone for a long time. It was like a dark ages of education where we were stuck in this, or we didn't even know how bad it really was. So we weren't searching for alternatives. But now it's so bad, and more people know it, that we're like, wow, what do we do? And it's like, oh, here's the answer. And the answer's been around for a long time. We don't have to invent anything new. It's all there, which is great. Just got to do it now. And that's can be difficult and it takes a lot of courage, but there's a lot of people doing it now, which is really great, which is why I encourage you. My kids go to a classical Christian school. Go find a classical Christian school near you. Pray that there's one near you and you can get in and it will change your kid's life. But before we do that, I want to debunk a pet peeve of mine. People will say, and well-meaning people, and I've always said this too, just because it like rolls off the tongue. There's so many things that roll off the tongue that are so wrong. Like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? That just like rolls off our tongue and we say it, we've all said it or all thought it before. That's just not true. Just because it rolls off the tongue doesn't mean it's true. And here's another one. Ready? Have you ever said this? Don't teach kids what to think. Teach them, what's the rest? How to think. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. Oh, it's so good. It's so kind and loving and magnanimous and not preachy. Don't teach kids what to think. Teach them how to think. In other words, you wise adult who knows the truth about life, quiet down. Don't impart wisdom to young people. You sit down, let us do it instead. That's what they're really saying, people from the top, the left who are saying that. You pipe down. I want to debunk this with this claim. If you don't know what to think, then you won't know how to think. Again, the claim is, don't teach kids what to think, teach them how to think. And I say, no, that's stupid. You need to tell kids what to think, because if they don't know what to think, they won't know how to think. And I'll prove it with an embarrassing story about me. So I graduated high school in the very beginning of the era when they stopped teaching dates. In history class, no dates. And I distinctly remember having the conversation with this teacher about how she was saying, we're not doing dates anymore, dates aren't important, we're just gonna focus on the big ideas, the overarch, because it's too hard for kids. Oh, you know what, poor kids can't memorize a couple numbers here and there, it's too difficult. Oh, when was World War II? I can't figure it out, I can't remember 1941, that's too hard. Kids didn't want to remember dates anymore, and the kids won. I went to school in New York. So I took the Regents exam. That was the big statewide test in New York. It's called the Regents test in New York. By the way, that was the same year when the passing grade went from a 65 to a 55. Shocker, more kids passed. Oh, it's unbelievable. Our rates of passing went up so much. We're so great. They just lowered the test. The passing grade, 65 to 55. But again, I was at the beginning of never learning dates. All right, fast forward. Graduated college, history major, just adding to the embarrassment of the moment. Got my first radio job. I was in Jackson, Tennessee, and I was talking to one of the most decorated war heroes in American history. I believe at the time he was the 12th or 15th, something like that, most decorated war hero ever. His name's Colonel Jim Harding. He's still with us. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He flew 596 missions in Vietnam. He's one of the most incredible men I've ever met in my life. And we're in the studio together. I'm hosting and he's the guest who's sitting right across from me. And I forget exactly what I said or asked, but it was obviously so dumb. It made it so obvious to him, this incredible war hero, that I did not know which war came first, Vietnam or Korea. I didn't know the order of the wars. This is the fruit of not being taught dates. And I saw the example of, I didn't know the order, therefore I didn't know how to think. How can you learn to think about American history and the role of the Korean and Vietnam War in it if you don't know what happened? And if you don't know which came first even? We've all seen clips of young people on the streets, not even young people, but a lot of them are young people, but anyone on the streets, and they don't know anything. They don't know what country is to our north. They don't know what country we fought the Revolutionary War against. They don't know what year we signed the Declaration of Independence. Like basic knowledge, basic stuff. So, and like we don't teach the basic stuff because, well, we got to teach them what to, or how to think. They don't even know how to think either. So we don't teach them what to think in the name of being taught how to think, but in the end, we have generations of kids who don't know what to think or how to think. Great job, everyone. This is the head of a school in England called the Michaela School. She's known as the toughest headmistress in the country. And she's great. And here she is making this point again about what to think versus how to think.
This business of teaching them how to think. What that looks like in a classroom, in a high school, is that, okay, so what that is the standard discussion between knowledge and skills. Should we teach them knowledge or should we teach them skills? How to think is a skill, and it can only be done within a particular domain. So I don't know how to think about cars. Okay, if you told me, you put a car in front of me and said, create a different kind of car, Catherine, be creative, think outside the box. I wouldn't know what to do because I don't know anything about cars. But if you tell me to turn education on its head, I've done exactly that. I've been very radical. I've thought outside the box and I've done things very differently. Why? Because I know education inside out. The only way you can think in a creative manner or think outside the box and have independent thoughts about anything is to know it really well. And so that means children at school level need to be taught loads of knowledge. So when you all say things like we need to teach them how to think, I disagree with you. When I say we need to teach them what to think, what I mean by that is we need to give them knowledge about the world wars, about slavery, about colonialism, about all of these ideas that if they don't have historical knowledge, they're unable to make a judgment that is well informed and that isn't just going to go down an ideological route. You know, all children are communists, okay? They're all communists. When you talk to them, they're all communists because when they hear about communism, they go, you mean everybody is going to have equality? You mean we're going to share? And then, everybody poor and rich doesn't happen anymore. Everybody's just the same. That's lovely. And the reason why children are all communists is because they're naive. They're vulnerable and it sounds nice to them. And so that's what they go for. They don't have enough knowledge or enough wisdom to be able to make correct decisions. That's why, for instance, we ban alcohol, we ban cigarettes. I believe we should ban smartphones, we ban sex, we ban marriage, we ban driving. There are all kinds of things that we ban from children. And the thing about the libertarian right, while I myself believe in freedom and I believe in freedom of speech and all of that, when it comes to children, I don't believe in any of it. I believe that children need their freedoms restricted so that later in life they can be truly free. And when I say their freedoms need to be restricted, that doesn't mean that they're unhappy. You saw at my school just how happy they were.
So let me ask you a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Do you mean that their freedoms should be restricted, or do you mean that the domain within which they have freedom should be restricted?
If you don't indoctrinate your kids, someone else will. And one reason why parents don't indoctrinate our kids properly is because well-meaning parents have been told, don't teach them what to think. Don't teach them. No, you don't teach them. Teach them how to think. Really, that's telling parents, don't teach your kids what's good, beautiful, or true. Let us do it. Let the school system do it. Let the government do it. And they teach your kids things ranging from slop to pure wickedness and evil. And good parents abdicated that to the schools in the name of not indoctrinating. Like we parents, we don't want to indoctrinate the kids, so we'll let you, the school, do it. Come on, someone's indoctrinating your kids. Either it's going to be them, people you do not want telling your kids anything, or it's going to be you. And we know that this is from the devil. Deuteronomy 6, the word of God, verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently. Not one time, diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in the house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise all the time. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand and they shall be frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. You need to teach your kids the way they should go. If you are not, they're up for grabs. And someone else is going to grab them. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way they should go. Where are you training your children to go? Or I should say, who's training your children? You or someone else? And if you teach your kids what to think, you teach them what to think. You teach them what is good, what is beautiful, and what is true. Only then can one day ever they have hope of being able to think. My podcast is called Politics by Faith. We take the news of the day, something like education, and we run it through the Bible. It's all in there. Deuteronomy, Proverbs, it's everywhere. Everything going on in the world today is in the Bible. And that's the point of my podcast. We do it pretty much every day. Take the news of the day, run it through the Bible, get a biblical worldview. Things make sense. Politics by Faith is the name of the podcast. Check it out everywhere you listen to podcasts. Mike Slater, Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word.